If you're interested in the story behind the business headlines, check out Big Technology Podcast, my weekly show that features in-depth interviews with CEOs, researchers, and reformers in business and technology. Hi, I'm Alex Kantrowitz. I'm a longtime journalist, CNBC contributor, and the host of the show. I empty my Rolodex every Wednesday to bring you awesome episodes, so go check out Big Technology Podcast. It's available on all podcast apps. Would love to have you as a listener.
From LinkedIn News, I'm Jessie Hempel, host of the Hello Monday podcast. Start your week with the Hello Monday podcast. We'll navigate career pivots. We'll learn where happiness fits in. Listen to Hello Monday with me, Jessie Hempel, on the LinkedIn Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the American Negotiation Institute's podcast, where we will teach you the skills you need to get more out of life. And now your host, Kwame Christian.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Negotiation for Entrepreneurs. My name is Kwame Christian and I'm a business lawyer, and I am passionate about teaching entrepreneurs like you how to get better deals for your business. Our guest today is Paul Proffitt. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, and he was able to successfully raise over $20 million from investors for one of his startups. He's also the founder of Sundown Rundown, a nonprofit that connects entrepreneurs to investors, mentors, and other resources that can help them take their business to the next level. If you're an entrepreneur in Ohio, they have chapters in Akron, Cleveland, Canton, Columbus, Mansfield, and New Albany, Ohio. If you're outside of Ohio, don't worry. You still have access to Paul through this podcast. So before we jump into the interview, there's some points that I want to highlight. Paul gives some great insights on how to negotiate and manage relationships outside of the business and within the business team itself. He also has some great tips for startups that are interested in getting angel or venture capital funding. So without further ado, I introduce to you Paul Proffitt. So we are here with Paul Proffitt, one of the startup leaders in Columbus. And I gave a little bit of an intro already leading into this, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about yourself and your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, sure thing. So it is like most entrepreneurial journeys, bumpy and with various other types of with stints with corporate and then back out into entrepreneurship. So I think kind of where I kind of got the entrepreneurial bug was starting off in actually high school. I worked the typical part-time job, but during high school, but with a small business called, oddly enough, Hacker's Heaven. It was a customized computer do-it-yourselfer store in Columbus, Ohio, and the entrepreneurs who founded that basically were bootstrapping that business. They grew it to about 30 employees into 3 different locations around central Ohio. With most entrepreneurial businesses, sometimes the entrepreneurial teams, as things grow, don't work out well together. So they kind of broke up a little bit. I became good friends with the kind of the main founder of that organization, and as he kind of retooled the organization, got involved very much early on with the kind of the rebranding and the restarting up of that organization, and kind of moving into the e-waste recycling business, which had a lot of very lean margins, but still a very interesting type of startup community with that, and building out a business from the ground up. Helped him scale that business to about $2.5 million in gross revenue, which, is a small business, but still, pretty decent for an early stage startup that was running for about 2 or 3 years. Made a small exit from that business, and then I went into corporate, and for a few years went back and joined another e-waste recycler, helped them grow their business, and then jumped back into higher ed, went and got my master's degree, started doing a lot of work with the Center for Entrepreneurship at The Ohio State University, and got kind of bitten by the bug again, and actually did a couple of startups while I was getting my MBA, one of which was a biodiesel production facility. We were able to raise about half the money, which was not a small feat. It was about $20 million on a $40 million project. Like most big projects, though, we kind of saw that the alternative energy market kind of went upside down on us. And so we ripped the wiring out of it and started moving on to a new one. And fortunately, we got pretty far down the road without actually having to spend any investors' money. So when we had to shut down that company, we had a good handoff to the investors, basically giving back pretty much 99% of their money back and saying, here's why we can't go forward and burn your cash. So just from that, I wouldn't really call it a failure, but from that learning experience, really picked up some good kind of investor relationship, kind of skills from that effort. And then basically still working on a few very small software-based startups kind of in my free time with a couple of business partners. But I've been really kind of focusing a lot of my efforts with the Sundown Group, which is the nonprofit I founded to really kind of help connect entrepreneurs up with investors, mentors, and potential talent to help other entrepreneurs be able to kind of take that next step and grow their businesses. That's
fantastic. That is really cool. One thing I wanted to go back for the listeners, you said e-waste was one of the businesses. Can you talk about what that is?
Right. So e-waste is really what is generated from all the computers, cell phones, pieces of technology that we have generated as a modern information society. And a lot of those products have very nasty elements in them, such as mercury, palladium, and other types of materials that once they they end up in a landfill when they decompose, if they actually do decompose, because a lot of it is plastic, that can cause some environmental issues. So the two companies I was involved with was basically helping companies figure out what to do when they throw away all of their computer equipment. So that was creating streams for demanufacturing these different computers and electronic devices into kind of their raw materials, getting them recycled. So we'd have plastics go to plastic recyclers. With the gold from the chips that were being recycled was that they'd be sent to smelters, and that gold would be turned into basically gold ingot again, which would be then sold back into the chip manufacturers to be turned into more chips. So we basically tried to have a zero landfill policy by taking in all this different types of technology and finding the best ways to recycle it. So it was, I always like to say we were living on the cutting edge of obsolescence with technology like that. Yeah. And so we'd find aftermarkets, of course, so there'd be some computers that still had value that people could still use, so we resold those through different reselling channels such as eBay, direct-to-consumer, things like that, where we basically refurbished those older computers and put them into use again. We had a pretty active donation activities with some of the school groups and school systems that were here in Ohio to give underprivileged youth, a computer so that they can actually do their homework at home and not have to rely on going to the library or having to get all their work done at the computer lab at their school during school hours.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Okay, I have a quick question. So you said with one of the first businesses you were with, not as an owner, but as an employee, the business kind of faltered because of issues between the partners. In your experience working with different startups and being a mentor to different entrepreneurs, do you see that as a problem often?
Yeah, I mean, the entrepreneurial team is really the most important thing in terms of the success of the business. And, going out as a solopreneur is really, really hard because, we all don't have we're not all supermen and superwomen to be able to run a business and have all the expertise in, marketing and operations and finance and strategy. And so having an entrepreneurial team is very, very important, and having a good crew of people that you can trust and work together with. And, you can still have your professional discourse and arguments and things like that, which is, healthy with any team. But, I've seen more startups fail because of deficiencies in the team, to where one member of the team, they have an ownership stake in the company, but then life gets in the way and their focus is pulled somewhere, but they're still not ready to let go of the company and their responsibility, even though they can't really execute on it. And so that creates a lot of turmoil in the team, and usually small issues over time, if not addressed, become, kind of that cancer within the team, and then you got a full-fledged tumor, and then it metastasizes, and you're fighting over where to go have coffee for your meeting because everyone's just not getting along with each other. And that's one of the bigger challenges that I see with a lot of the startups, is that sure, you're all friends, you're all kind of have this forward-looking mission to do things, but then because the startup team hasn't put down an operating agreement, hasn't quite put down the swim lanes of where.
Hey you, I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/marketer. Terms and conditions apply.
One person's responsibility starts, and where they end, you end up, getting kind of this infighting that happens. And then, again, kind of the, having the different goals of the team, there's something I always like to say is the specter of money showing up, which if it looks like there might be an investment starting to happen, or there's investors that are interested, and those investors may or may not be a good fit, sometimes you get that one person in the team that just wants the money because they need to make an exit, because all of a sudden you find out that they have that mortgage they need to pay, or they decide to buy a car and they have a car loan, and kind of that unknown things that happen among partners that show up as you build out a business. Those sorts of little things just kind of keep growing and creating those sorts of issues and make a team fall apart.
Right. Wow. Okay, so what advice would you have for people as they build their team and build their business? What kind of things can they do beforehand to kind of protect themselves from these kind of disputes between themselves?
Well, from a legal standpoint, definitely having an operating agreement is very important. And having this understanding that as you grow the business, not everybody's going to be coming along for the ride at the end of the day. Part of what we always say about adult supervision of the businesses and being an adult is that sometimes you're going to have to fire your friends when you start up a company, and that's a very tough thing to do. And when I say fire, I don't mean from hand them the pink slip, they show up one day and they can't log into anything, but at some point there's going to be someone that was part of the original founding crew that is going to be exiting the company. It may be a forced exit because of behavior, or it might be, the ones where you can only, people's skill sets can only take them so far in growing the company. At some point, if you think you're going to be the CEO of a company and your expertise is only in running companies that generate, $500,000 in revenue, and all of a sudden you're faced with global expansion and things like that, you're going to want to hire in a CEO that knows how to do those things. So as a founder or as the current CEO, you're going to have the discipline to basically fire yourself as CEO and hire somebody else in that's got the skill set to carry the business forward. So those are the kinds of thing, there's kind of that thinking of not putting yourself first, but putting the organization first and the growth of the company first, and then having, basically the rules of the road of how people are going to operate through an operating agreement, and how, ownership transfers at different points, or actually how ownership is assigned. Those sorts of things are very important to have at the very start of it, so that as things grow, as things start to get messy, people can refer back to, hey, here's what we all agreed upon, and here's how things need to go.
Right. Wow. It's funny, the timing of this interview is really interesting because I have 3 meetings with clients today. 2 have already happened. And both of those businesses are business owners dealing with bad partners because they didn't think ahead. They don't have agreements written out in a way that has much foresight, because now a lot of times people are using these form agreements like from LegalZoom and whatnot. But it takes a little bit more than a form to be able to look into the future and foresee those kind of problems that you're going to have in your business. So it takes a lot of customization and thought to do it right.
Exactly. And, when getting into a business with the partner, I mean, it is almost like a marriage. And, as the statistic goes, 50% of marriages, end in divorce. Well, companies end in divorce as well. And sometimes those divorces get very, very, very contentious and bloody and nasty. And, if you don't have a prenup,
right,
you're kind of screwed. And that's really what the operating agreement does, and being able to lay out those rules. And honestly, it also goes to picking your partner too when it comes to getting in business with someone. It's like, oh, I didn't know that my buddy Bob was a gambler and liked hitting the clubs too much. Those are things you got to kind of find out. They might be this great business person and they have all these great connections, but when you look at their personal life, it's a total hot mess. And you got to make sure that, that their personal life doesn't impact, their business decisions and things like that. So, you really got to get to know your partners, warts and all, as they say, to make sure that, you can get along with them.
Yeah. Wow, that's great advice. That is great advice. Okay, let's shift for a little bit. Let's move towards the investment side, because I know every entrepreneur has that dream of getting on Shark Tank and making that $1 million deal. But you've had that experience, not with Shark Tank though, but with successfully finding investors for your business. So can you talk a little bit about how you were able to do that?
Really, I mean, there is really no silver bullet for getting investors into your company or into your organization or whatever you're trying to do. The thing that got us money was really finding an investor that knew the industry that we were in, that had experience in that industry and could actually add value to what we were doing. So we were very strategic about who we were pitching to. We made sure that the people who we were talking to were people who invested in oil and gas. Yes, this was a related industry. It was slightly different. But, the production process of biodiesel was very similar to the production process of distilling oil. So we were looking for investment groups that have backed drilling oil, the people, the wildcatters that would, spend millions of dollars just poking holes in the ground, hoping that they would, find oil. That was that was the people with the risk tolerance that we were targeting. And so we didn't really approach anybody in the central Ohio area because, a lot of their backing has been technology-based startups. And even though there was a technology component to it, we were investing in big, heavy machinery. And these companies are the funds and the angel investors in central Ohio, they don't invest in big, heavy machinery. So we didn't really kind of waste our time going after people that we knew would say no to us initially because it wasn't in the fit. So what we did when we were seeking out investors was we focused on those investors who had invested in things like us before, were looking to, do more investment, and were, and understood the risk that we were getting into by trying to enter into a new market that would have a payout, 10, 15 years down the line, as opposed to an exit in 18 to 36 months.
Right.
So those were the people that we targeted for finding investors. We didn't jump and scream from the rooftops, hey, we're looking for startup investment. One, because that would run into some SEC issues. But number two, if you're just screaming from the rooftops, you're screaming from the rooftops like everybody else is, but having a very good targeted message and why it would be great for that particular investor is how we were able to get our investors into our biodiesel thing.
Interesting. Okay. That's a fascinating story, because I think that's what a lot of people end up doing. They just say, hey, if anybody is interested in investing in a company, I know a guy, and that guy is me. But I like to see your strategy. That's fascinating. And I think that's good advice too. Yeah.
I mean, investors do not invest in things that they don't understand. So as an entrepreneur, as you're seeking investors, you want to pitch to the people that understand your market. You don't want to spend 90% of your presentation saying, here's what a bit is, and here's what a byte is, and here's what an iPhone is. I mean, if those are the types of people that you're trying to pitch your software application to, they're not going to get it. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to invest in you. So spending a lot of time figuring out who your investment audience is and making sure that they fit into what you're trying to do as a business is very, very important. So it's not like the Shark Tank mentality where you stand up and you pitch an idea to 6 investors, and those 6 investors start fighting over each other to get in on a deal. It just doesn't work that way. It's months of meetings and months of due diligence and a very hard, long road to slog before someone trusts you enough to part with their hard-earned dollars and invest it in your company.
That's interesting. Okay, so now let's say we've made it through these meetings and the due diligence is done, and now it's time to really work out that deal. As far as like negotiation strategy goes, how did you go about getting a deal that was fair for you while still retaining a good amount of equity, or doing what's best for your business?
Right. So we came in with an understanding of what our valuation of the business was, what we were bringing to the table. So, for instance, if you say I'm raising $1 million and I'm only going to give you 2% of the company for $100K, investors are going to go, well, you don't know how to do math, because that's technically 10% of the company at your current valuation of $1 million for $100K, right? Mm-hmm. So, things like that make it tough for investors to really want to do things with you. And likewise, if an investor comes and says, you know what, your company's worth $1 million, I'm only going to give you $100K, but I want 80% of your company. As an entrepreneur, you should just kind of walk away from that deal, because then that investor is going to money whip you until you are not in business anymore. Mm-hmm. Or it's a game to take your company. So what we usually say is, depending on, it all comes down to the valuation of your company and being able to justify that valuation. And that is, you're going to, as an entrepreneur, you're going to kind of highball the valuation, and then as the investor, you're going to kind of lowball the valuation. So coming in at whatever kind of middle ground is what I would call a good spot to be at. I always like to say that if you're on the term sheet, if neither the investor nor the entrepreneur is 100% happy with the deal, you've probably made a good deal. Just because, the entrepreneur is not going to get everything they want and the investor is not going to get everything they want. So if you're both not, unhappy about it, but you're not like doing backflips over the deal, you've probably made a good deal. Because that way it's fair to the investor and it's fair to you as the entrepreneur. So that's usually how I try to play things with valuations. Being able to justify the valuation and making sure that the investment that is put into that the percentage of ownership, is in line with the valuation of that company.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I like it a lot because it kind of demystifies the process, because it's not magic or anything. We're not trying to use sleight of hand to get more than what the business is worth. Like you said, it often just comes down to the valuation, which is simple math.
Right. And and valuations, as you talk to venture capitalists and angel investors, they're like, so how do you come up with the valuation of an early stage startup? They kind of just smile and wink and go, they lick their finger and they stick it up in the air and they go, yeah, that's about what that company's worth.
Wow.
It really is. I mean, you have a asset that has not an open market to justify the valuations of it. So the best you can do is like in real estate and find comps. So, hey, we're building the next, Instagram, and we're just launching right now. And so what was Instagram worth when they were just launching? It's like, okay, well, they're worth maybe $3 million. And so, okay, so Instagram at the stage that we're at right now is worth about 3. We're coming into a competitive market. Maybe we're actually only worth about 2 because we're fighting up against Instagram and all this other fun stuff. And so you really have to kind of come up with a realistic number. And if you kind of walk the investor through of how you came up with that number and show those justifications, you'll get head nods. And they're like, oh, okay, this is someone who understands math and understands valuations, and yeah, I trust them. So yeah, let's do it. Because honestly, your number is going to be no better than what the investor comes up with, because you're both looking at the same type of research and you're both assigning a value to something that, has no value until you assign it.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. So beyond the numbers, when you're looking for an investor, I know you mentioned you wanted somebody who's actually in that industry. Is there anything else that is of value that you try to get other than just the money and investment from them?
Oh yeah, definitely. If they have industry connections to the industry that we're in, if they have expertise, if they've done other startups in the past that are in the space that you're playing in, if they've come from industry and they've made a big exit. Say I'll give the alternative energy example. If they came out of oil and gas with a big exit, they're still looped into that industry. You're going to leverage them for, not only industry connections, as I mentioned, but just their knowledge of how the industry is run and what they can do to add to the business. Investors are not just cash. If investors were just cash and behaved like banks, then just go to the bank. You can probably get debt at a much cheaper value than what you'd be getting early stage startup money from.
Oh, wow.
Because they want to return on their investment. They want to beat the market those investors do. So they're looking at, anywhere between a 2x to a 10x, return on their investment. Whereas for a bank, they just care if you cover the debt service on the loan. They let you refinance that loan 500 times. Right. As long as you keep paying those interest payments, hey, bank's happy, right? So the investor adds more than just cash. They can be an advisor. They can be a mentor, all those things that you need, for your company. I always look at investors as additional adult supervision for the company. And as an early stage startup, you can't get enough adult supervision to help, avoid the expensive pitfalls of, knowing which rocks to kick over and which ones to completely leave alone because there's something underneath it that's going to bite your company and kill you.
Yeah.
Those are all very important things to know. And having someone who has already made those mistakes and is very important to have on your team.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And what's really interesting to me about this is to be able to come to those conclusions, it takes a lot of humility to realize, like, there are things that I'm missing, and I would benefit from additional adult supervision. And I guess that's one of the traits of a good entrepreneur, knowing where you're weak and knowing who you can add to the team to really take you to the next level.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're putting a team together. And, as much as, LeBron James can, basically score on anybody during a game, I mean, he needs his other teammates on the Cavs to actually, be able to make a win, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you could be the best leader on the planet. You could have some great skill sets, but you don't have them all. You're not connected. You're not wired up to every investor on the planet. You're not wired up to, all the industry experts that you need. And, and you may not have the gray hairs that are needed, through stress and experience, not necessarily through age, of going through, one of these rodeos, before. And I just mixed a whole ton of metaphors there. So,
I like it. That's awesome. Okay, so now let me ask you this: when it comes to getting those additional qualities from the investors, are those things that you ask for explicitly in the meetings?
That's what I look for, and it's really you do your due diligence on the investor as much as they be doing due diligence on you. So, I'm not going to go in and pitch an investor who I know is a jerk, who's going to give you an egregious term sheet and put you over a barrel and make it very hard to work with, or someone that has, like I said, that invests in software and I'm trying to start a biodiesel plant. I already know that there's not going to be a good fit there, that there's not going to be, someone that I'm going to be able to work with that I'm going to get value out of. So, like I said, it's targeting those investors who can help your company be successful beyond just the cash portion of things. So that's really what I try to look for with investors, and you can get that through, investor profiles, looking at what they've invested in. A lot of the people that I approach for investors, I don't approach them for cash right off the bat. I actually work on building a relationship with them. Sit down and have coffee and, talk to some of the local fund managers here in town. Be like, oh, so what do you guys do? What are you looking for? And really kind of get to know them and see how they, respond to the universe. I mean, if you take them out to lunch, are they nice to the waiter and the waitress, or are they complete jerks about it? Things like that clue into their personality. And if you're able to work with them, those are the things that you really want to look at when dealing with investors. Because like I said, if the investor's not there to where you're able to work with them, they can bring additional things to the table besides money. If you look in the right places, if you're just looking for money, you can get money anywhere.
I love that point, because it's funny. This is something that my other friend John said in the last interview. Really, there's no real beginning and end point for the negotiation. You're always in that negotiation position, because like you said, with your endeavor to get lunch with these people and learn more about them, information gathering is really the first stage in any negotiation. And what you're doing is you're positioning yourself within the community to show that you are of value and seek value from other people. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, honestly, when I've talked with other investors, they're like, they hate it when people show up cold to them and ask them for money. It's not so much that, hey, take me out to dinner, wine and dine me, those sorts of things, take me on a date. It's really investors don't want to be seen as just a piggy bank. Right. They want to contribute to society too. They want to contribute their value and their knowledge. And sure, they bring along some cash, which helps, kind of grease the wheels of your company and get things going. But, they want to be productive, citizens in society as well, which is, why they're investors and why they invest in startups. If they didn't want to do that, they would just give all their money to their broker and say, go throw this in the stock market. I'll take my, 1.6x return on Procter & Gamble stock after I hold it for 5 years. They want to be actively involved and engaged with companies as well.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Okay, well, let's end with this. I have This is a question I'm going to ask everybody. What is your negotiation philosophy? Like, what tips would you give to other entrepreneurs as they utilize this skill to move their business forward?
I've always come away with negotiation of the fact that as long as you come out with a win-win scenario where it's not a win-loss or you're trying to, take everything from your opponent when it's super confrontational. I feel like that's not a good way to approach negotiation. I know some people approach negotiation as a winner take all. You can kind of see our potential Republican nominee, and if you've read his books,
I have.
Kind of takes a winner take all approach to negotiation, which is not good, because that's how you make enemies. That's how you create, not a good environment. I always say that as long as both people walk away from the table satisfied, but again, not, as I mentioned before, one party's sitting there doing backflips and the other person's thinking about jumping out of a window when it's after, that's not healthy negotiation. That's not a healthy deal. If both parties walk away satisfied, but maybe with a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth, not everyone got what they wanted, but they needed, then I consider that a good negotiation and a good deal that has been put together. Always have your BATNA, as they say, your best alternative, your best next alternative in your back pocket, so that if a negotiation does go south, you can at least walk away and go, pick up what you need somewhere else. Maybe not at the best ideal terms, but having that plan B, having that plan C is always good. And then even in your negotiations, having that fallback position to where, it's not ideal, but it's good enough. It'll get the job done.
Right.
I don't know. So it's kind of a more of a Zen philosophy to negotiation than a art of war philosophy, I guess.
No, I like it, because I come from the same negotiation school. And I'm glad you brought up Mr. Trump, because when you look at his business dealings, really, you can tell he's been successful, and his negotiation style works for him. But one thing that we need to consider is that we are not positioned similarly to Mr. Trump. I can't negotiate like him because I'm not sitting on $10 billion. So I can't just swing my weight around and force people into deals without much creativity or flexibility. When you're in a position where you have less resources, you need to be a lot more accommodating and a lot more flexible and creative to come up with a solution that works for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, when you're a early stage startup, you're negotiating from a position of not a lot of power. And so, you really have to be that Zen master and know some kung fu to use the weight of your opponent against you a little bit, or against them a little bit, so that you can come out ahead.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for this, Paul. This is really helpful.
Yeah, it was a total pleasure.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode with Paul. He had a lot of great tips for you that you can actually use as you move your business forward. And if you are a business owner and you want to get a list of negotiable business expenses, go to AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/list. There's a link to that in the description as well. That free list will give you an idea of some of the business and personal expenses that you can actually negotiate, and hopefully you'll be able to save some money at the end of the year. If you are, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear how it went. Thanks again for listening, and if you like this episode, please rate and subscribe. We really appreciate the support, and I am looking forward to seeing you in the next one. I'll catch you later.